we're engineers at heart. We love building things, and that's the fun part. No one will say they love building things more than I do. But really, the work just starts once the engineering is done. In my experience, most of the efforts and the effectiveness of a data science project really starts and hinges on your ability to accomplish this, what we call a pull through. You don't want to throw models and tools over the fence and expect people to use it. You want to bring them along. You're assuming that you built a product that your stakeholder base is ready for. So have you measured their literacy? Have you measured their maturity? Can this create value in the short term as well as set up for the long-term business strategy?
Hello, welcome everyone to the next episode of the AIM Media House podcast Simulated Reality. Today we have with us the founder of Tux Data, Numan Karim. We want to start off, Numan, by introducing you to our audience. We want to understand a little bit of your background and how you came to found Tux Data. The whole idea of this podcast is to make the world aware of this amazing product and website that you've built, and we want to know the journey behind how we landed there. So let's start with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Numan Karim. Again, thanks for having me. So my background is in data science, analytics, and statistics. And at this point, I have over a decade of experience in the field. I've always wanted to be a data scientist since I was in high school. Led to me studying statistics in my undergrad, and I'm an engineer by background. My dad is a civil engineer, and I was always fascinated in the things he built. And I always envisioned data to become a very prominent, have a prominent place in society in the near future. So I spent a lot of time in my academic career studying data, getting familiar with the different concepts, methods, tactics, tools. It's been fun seeing where this field has been going. And as part of my full-time career, I've been an individual contributor, data scientist for about 5 years. And for the past 5 years or so, I've been in a leadership position, managing a team of engineers, statisticians, and data scientists, data engineers in a Fortune 100 setting. So over the course of my career, I've seen kind of the landscape of data science in an industrial setting, and the realities of actually creating tangible value using data in a setting, the challenges, the successes, and learnings. And so it really drove me to creating Dux Data because there's so much data science content out there right now, focusing on primarily technical skills, and the acceleration of tactics, models, is actually counterintuitively making it more difficult for aspiring data scientists and budding data professionals to actually deliver effective solutions. So my vision was to offer a different kind of data science training, and Dux Data, it's not really a coding or algorithm course by any means. There's thousands of courses around technicals. And so I wanted to kind of approach data science training differently from a strategic angle, from a leadership angle. What are those sort of soft skills that can complement the technical skills that really drive data science and AI? So right now, Dux Data is kind of a one of its kind, teaching kind of the practical strategy and business skills that's becoming increasingly a must-have for data professionals.
Fantastic. And what was it? What was it within you that sparked that entrepreneurial, interest? I'm sure that data scientists. I've met a lot of data scientists now. I was a data scientist, by the way, if you didn't know. I started out as a career for data science and then decided to study journalism for some reason. But, but what sparked this entrepreneurial interest, and what was the, what was it? What were you so passionate about that you wanted to start Tux Data?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned journalism. Actually, at one point in my academic career, I thought I was going to be a doctor. I was pre-medicine for all of one semester, and very quickly I realized, that engineering side of me wanted to really build things and build products. And I think there's a fascinating intersection between entrepreneurship and data science that's not really talked about enough. And when we think about entrepreneurship, it's really the process of finding ways to combine resources to create value for a certain market. And there's so many parallels between data science and entrepreneurship. I just generally like building things. I like creating something that I can deliver for a customer or a stakeholder. And it's not just about creating efficiencies and dollars and saving hours, but making someone's job easier and knowing that something you can create can be used by someone, and knowing it makes their job easier and they're happier in their role, and that's something that was a creation of yours. So there's this concept of entrepreneurial data science, which is an employee that exists inside of a company, and they're empowered to drive innovation and create value from inside the company. And that's kind of how I view data science in industries and data teams in general. I think we need to approach data science with this sort of startup mindset. So if you think of a company or industry like a marketplace, and each marketplace has people, they're trying to achieve certain objectives. They have processes that drive those objectives and tools and technology that enable them. And I think of data scientists as our job is to identify against and execute against those market needs. So we have to immerse ourselves in that market to really appreciate those intricacies and the handshakes between people, processes, and objectives. So it was sort of the engineer in me. My dad, as a civil engineer, we always joke that on the surface level, his role wasn't as glamorous as it sounds. He's a civil engineer, actually designed sewer systems for the city of Chicago. And you're like, huh, that's interesting. Must be kind of a boring job. And we talk about how there's a creativeness to engineering, some things that people kind of don't think about on a regular basis. So instilling those sort of concepts in me, helping me with early on mathematics, just general engineering concepts, uh, data, knowing data was again going to be a primary component of society. I kind of saw a vision for myself early on, and I've been on that route ever since.
Fantastic. Now that we know your story, let's talk a little bit about Duck's data itself, right? Duck's data is a e-learning platform, right? Is that a
It's an e-learning
correct
platform,
summarization?
correct?
Okay.
Yeah.
Now it's no surprise, and I'm sure that you have done your uh, a lot of you have done your homework in terms of knowing that there are a lot of e-learning platforms already out there, right? There's every day probably newer things coming up, and at the same time, there's a lot of free resources also available in e-learning. Tell me, why did you decide to start an e-learning platform, and what was going to be different about it in your head that you thought it will work out?
Yeah, absolutely. I myself have taken a lot of readily available e-learning courses outside of my academic institutions in statistics and applied data science. I taught myself SQL through e-learning. I taught myself Python through e-learning. And all those technical skills I had accumulated by the time I had gone to industry. And I recall kind of my first year and a half in a role. And it's a common denominator amongst most early data professionals. They jump to try to apply models in any scenario they can. So I remember being tasked with a pretty straightforward business problem that required looking for outliers in some lab data. And my first thought was, I'm gonna deploy this k-means model and show it to my boss. He's going to be blown away. And so after I did that, I built the model, I took it to him, and he looked at me like, what is this? What's the point of this? Why do you need to do this? You could have built like a bar graph and accomplished the same thing. So it was kind of an early lesson for me around, the technicals only take you so far. And what does it mean to actually apply a fit for purpose solution that can actually be used and integrated into processes and actually generate that value? So it was like having blinders on. And I think that is again a common theme in data science, even more now with the growing capabilities of AI, large language models, and the likes. That if you think of this Venn diagram of data science, you traditionally see like the cross section of math, programming, statistics, and models, and you rarely hear anything or see anything around the business and the stakeholders and business strategy, technology, IT, et cetera. So Duck's data kind of reformatted this Venn diagram to say data science is 1/3 of the picture. You have data science, you have the business, you have technology, and you have these little components that connect them together. And it's all centered around kind of having a vision of transformation through data science. And to really enable that, you have to understand, again, this concept of a marketplace. Things are happening in a certain way in your organization, in any organization, in kind of this legacy format. And we as data scientists, I refer to us as kind of change agents, someone who helps the organization kind of evolve how we operate. And we have to influence and we have to kind of inspire new ways of working through data. So, I say to my team, the value of a data scientist is a function of their ability to deliver what the organization needs, not necessarily what the loudest voice wants or asks for, at risk of becoming a cost center. I think that's what a lot of data teams are now becoming, trying to balance short term needs and asks that don't actually create sustainable value for the organization. So, Dux Data is a culmination of my learnings, my experience, and my own kind of mental model approach to not just data science. This applies to data analysis, business intelligence. Non-technical roles would find value in this as well. So I believe Dux Data.
What are some of the problems that you see in the current education system, especially in data science courses? Do you believe that there is there's too much focus on technical prowess, and there is not enough focus on some of the soft skills that need to be teaches or business skills that need to be taught in a way that data scientists are able to work in real world teams?
I think data science as a field will foundationally be built on technical skills no matter what. That's absolutely must have capabilities for data professionals. And I think the course content that you're seeing nowadays is a reflection of maybe inexperience of what data science actually looks like in an industrial setting. So if you recall the budding of hiring data scientists in the industry in the mid 2010s, you saw this with big data, you saw this with self-service analytics, and now machine learning in the mid to late 2010s. Um, all these large companies hire data scientists, and this was led by big tech, thinking that overnight all these professionals can turn data into sort of this gold mine overnight. But quickly, I think the industry learned that wasn't the case, and data science was actually more complex than just building models. And so the biggest challenge I think facing data teams today is the integration of that data science, productizing data science into the business processes. So it goes back to asking, I think, simple and practical questions. What are we trying to solve for? Who's our audience? What objectives are we trying to optimize for? What's the expected value of our product or solution that we're trying to build? Things like considering the maturity and literacy of an organization. How do we go through those assessments, and how do we bring people along so that we can build things that are value add today, but also setting our organization up for the future? Well, why do I have to do that sort of leadership work or dealing with the stakeholders? Can't I just sit behind the scenes and build my models? And I think it is not necessarily the wrong mindset. I think increasingly companies are realizing that you need the data scientists at the table. And to be at the table, you need to be able to speak the stakeholders' language, be able to empathize and understand how things work today, so that once you build a solution or a model, you can also influence how a process needs to change, how work that's being done today and for the past 20 years can evolve into something no one really thought about or was possible in the past 10 years.
One of the things with data science, especially, is when you are mentioning data science, do you mean it as a umbrella of professionals under the data-driven technology spectrum? What I mean is that data analytics, data science, data engineering, AI, ML. And if yes, do you believe that the points that you're trying to make in terms of the importance for data professionals to have business understanding and domain knowledge and some other soft skills is relevant across these roles? Or let's say, for example, someone who's working as a research scientist at let's say Meta or Google do not need to have that kind of business understanding or soft skills? Or do you believe this is true for all roles that come in data-driven technologies?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it follows the 80-20 rule. I'd say 80% of data roles under this umbrella should have a certain level of business understanding. Data scientists, data analysts, kind of BI engineers that are more downstream in kind of in the data supply chain, they're closest to the stakeholders and the downstream users. To me, that's no question. They need to be as familiar with processes and people and the handshakes as possible. A good example, two good examples you called out was the data engineer and then the research scientist. In my experience, data engineers have to have some understanding of the business as well. When you reach a certain maturity level of a data team, you have more specialized roles where in a less mature team, you might have the data scientist wearing multiple hats. They play data engineer, they play data scientist, they also play kind of BI and on the front end work. And when you reach more specialized roles, the data engineer's job is to build sustainable, scalable data pipelines and to inform what are most likely more sophisticated and scalable models and applications. Those architectures, I think, are on one hand a reflection of the business problem as well. The data scientist is telling you and framing you a certain business problem, and I think the data engineer should have some level of understanding of what can go wrong, what's a risk, what is the end user expecting in terms of cadence of this model refreshing or stale data. How often do they backtrack and troubleshoot to determine when something might be going wrong or looks off in the data? So I think there's a level of understanding required there. Research scientists, I think, is probably the role where there's not a lot of stakeholder interaction these days. They're more on the forefront of core science and really making a dent on the latest and greatest technical capabilities and methods. So I think overall, it benefits everyone to have
Mhm.
an increased understanding of how the business works, how their business works, and eventually kind of increase the mean literacy of the organization.
So, considering this diverse set of roles, does your e-learning platform Dux Data also provide more customized solutions in terms of the need for they will have for building domain knowledge, business understanding, soft skills, etc., or is it one size fits all?
It right now it's one size fits all, and these to me are future proof skills for any data role. I would go as far as to say even non-technical audiences will find a lot of benefit in the content because it approaches business strategy leadership from the perspective of a data professional. So you won't find generic kind of buzzwords or non-realistic applications of some of these concepts. They all have some flavor of data in these topics. And to give you kind of a better frame of reference, one of my favorite topics to cover is monetizing data science and what it means to actually generate value. What does value look like, right? Value is not just dollars and cents or hours saved. We have a whole framework on qualitative and quantitative metrics to think about when you're working on new projects. Some of these may be stakeholder facing, and ideally, you want something that an end user or a customer can actually quantify. But even if a project fails, it doesn't mean it's a net negative for the organization. Maybe we tried a new model and now we know why it doesn't work. Maybe we created a new data source for this use case that we can recycle later. Maybe we built new competencies that elevated again the mean of our data team. So these strategy, leadership, and communication skills apply blanketly to these different data roles across the spectrum. And I think over time, I would like to specialize some of these concepts in Dux data to specific roles, as especially we learn more about how AI fits in and what good AI, effective AI looks like in organizations.
Fantastic. Can you give us some examples of some case studies and some success stories that Dux Data have seen that will help our audience relate to more? Maybe you can give an example while yeah.
Yeah, I have two examples, one good and one bad. There's a classic example that occurred just a few years ago with Zillow. You can find a lot of content on this use case. So Zillow is a home buying
Yeah.
website and company that operates in the U.S. and abroad as well. And in 2020 to 2021, they invested heavily in this AI machine learning model that could estimate home prices. If you've used Zillow before, they have this concept of a Zestimate, which is like the
Yeah.
estimated price of a home based on a bunch of features like number of bedrooms, square footage, number of bathrooms, etc. And this is an externally facing product, but also there was an internal utility for it where they thought, can we use this model to purchase homes for Zillow's inventory, sell after a certain period of time for a profit? Makes total sense as long as your model is reliable. So Zillow ended up purchasing over 7,000 different homes across the country, and it was working for a short period of time. And what Zillow learned later around 21, 22 was the model actually failed to acclimate to downturns and certain market behaviors that resulted in them taking on a bunch of inventory that they could not sell. So this model was rushed to production. It was scaled and positioned as this new, industry-leading capability that they could potentially license to other organizations, but it backfired. And there were, I think, a sufficient lack of scenario planning, risk assessment. This was a time where things were, and AI was still very, very shiny, but again, bad practices in terms of execution and planning led to very significant overhead for Zillow. And when we talk about what went wrong, what could have been done differently, so I think there was an over reliance on a model with not enough domain input and human oversight. And again, there were some technical gaps in terms of, did we handle data drift or concept drift enough that could have been solved from a technical standpoint if, again, it was vetted properly by subject matter experts inside the company. So that is one example I like to highlight as, a machine learning capability built in-house that was scaled to such a degree and had such promise, and the amount of profit it could generate for the company, it was almost like a perfect storm that backfired. And so, that's one example of what can go wrong when you don't consider the domain context, and bring in the stakeholders as part of the co-creation process. Now, a second example I like a lot is with UPS, which is a logistics and delivery services company, and primarily in the U.S. And they tackled a optimization problem for their delivery drivers. So, could they scale a very sophisticated route optimization system that would be deployed to all the drivers in a certain area and essentially optimize their routes? Again, leveraging big data, real time streaming, and redirect drivers to take routes that they normally wouldn't take. And at the highest level, huge potential value proposition there. And there's a lot of different, I guess, markets involved with this business problem, which I liked. You had the delivery drivers, which were the furthest downstream consumers of this product. You had the operation managers that are in charge of monitoring, the KPIs. You had the IT and data science teams to manage kind of that data supply chain. And upfront, they positioned the problem correctly. They knew their biggest challenge was going to be adoption by the drivers. They're used to kind of taking their own routes. They know their area so well. They know where all the shortcuts are. So now you're telling me, well, I need a computer to tell me where to go. There's some apprehension there, and as well as technical hurdles around the real-time reliance of this sort of system. But they took an iterative approach. They brought in the drivers, they brought in those operation managers to bake in the risks of those strategy upstream. They also didn't leave change management as a forethought. So it was this end-to-end view of a data science capability that did not have that blinders on of like, hey, we're just going to deploy this new GPS system. You have to follow it. It was kind of that real-time feedback. And it was a huge success for them. They saved over 100 million miles driven per year through this system. They took a proper approach to deploying this in kind of quote unquote POC environment, testing it in one neighborhood and then a whole city, and then scaling it up eventually across the country. And that netted ROIs again with time, gallons of gas saved, carbon emissions. So that's an example of another very probably the largest scale you can think of data science product that can be deployed across an industry.
Fantastic. And finally, any advice for upcoming data professionals in terms of in terms of the holy trinity, if I may say, that you are trying to focus on in terms of tech prowess, strategic inputs, and precision in execution?
Yeah, I think when while we're engineers at heart. We love building things, and that's the fun part. No one will say they love building things more than I do. But really, the work just starts once the engineering is done. In my experience, most of the efforts and the effectiveness of a data science project really starts and hinges on your ability to accomplish this, what we call a pull through. You don't want to throw models and tools over the fence and expect people to use it. You want to bring them along. You're assuming that you built a product that your stakeholder base is ready for. So have you measured their literacy? Have you measured their maturity? Can this create value in the short term as well as set up for the long-term business strategy? One thing engineers like most, I think, is autonomy. Being able to operate within their own kind of realm and cadence and sophistication. And when you think about the stakeholder base, when you think about the business problem, over time, you're going to build trust. Ultimately, the most value comes when you can disrupt a business process, transform how something's getting done, that ultimately nets some sort of value. But when you think of the people and the stakeholders and the customers, they're not going to just let you disrupt their processes. Those processes are sacred to them. So you need to build trust. So that could mean, playing with their data, doing some basic EDA, taking it back to them and say, hey, do these findings I've generated, line up with your understanding of how these work, or am I missing something here? You slowly iterate and kind of build your understanding of that market. So by the time you actually, have a vision or an idea for a large scale disruption, you have a seat at that table. But you're not going to get that seat unless you can show short-term value creation. So a lot of the course focuses on kind of the advice I'm kind of describing. When you don't consider the pull through an afterthought, when you're thinking about how to monetize upfront, when you can be that real change agent, it sets you up to have that long-term influence of not just the work you do, but the long-term roadmap of the organization. And in my experience, as you move up in your career, the communication, the leadership, and the strategy become a must. They become more and
Hmm.
more important, arguably more so than the technical expertise. When you see the heads of data, the VPs of data, a lot of them, if not all of them, are technical by background, but they got to those positions because they're able to see and visualize how data can transform a certain business process or a department or an organization. So my advice to kind of roll that up would be continuously improve your technical skills. That's going to be an evolving landscape, but also sprinkle in some of those soft skills, sprinkle in some of that business strategy and acumen, and it will amplify the amount of value you'll be able to generate for your organization.
Very true. One last question. Why the name Dux Data?
Yeah, Dutch data. So it's Latin for leading with data, and again, I thought that was an appropriate name for this company. Uh, you normally don't think of leadership and data, or most people don't. But I am a big proponent of crossing the two, and the intersection of the two will be what drives the future of AI. And AI is so fun right now because tomorrow is essentially unknown what the new capability will be and kind of the upper ceiling of what's possible. And I'm a big proponent of enabling this culture of kind of experimentation. And until you can enable that culture, data and AI can't really deliver the value that it can. So that approach of entrepreneurial data science, it really is the theme of Duck's data that comes to play. I think the common denominator in all of that is leadership.
Fantastic. On that note, Numan, thank you so much for making the time today.
Thank you, Kashyap. It was a pleasure.